So welcome everyone to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and joining me as always to break it all down is our resident expert.
Hi, everyone. Really excited for this one. We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. And to kick things off, I want you to think about the man who completely rewired modern music. Like the guy who sang about Space Oddity and Starman and, Major Tom stepping out into the void of space.
Right. The ultimate cosmic rock star.
Exactly. But here is the hook. That same guy, he was actually terrified of flying.
Yeah. Completely terrified. I mean, he preferred taking the train or a boat everywhere.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. And in one of the sources we're looking at today, it's a 2002 broadcast interview, he actually confessed that this fear of flying was oddly beneficial to him.
Beneficial how?
Well, when the interviewer asked how it fit into his life, he basically said it allowed him to just write about space, as opposed to actually having to go up into it.
Oh, wow. That completely flips the script on how we view his entire creative output, right? And that's exactly what we're digging into today. This deep dive is built on a really remarkable stack of sources. We've got 4 distinct, in-depth broadcast interviews with David Bowie, and they span multiple eras.
Yeah, we're looking at tape from 1979, 1997, 1999, and 2002.
Right. And just to be clear with everyone listening, the mission for this deep dive is not to just recount a standard biography. We are using these sources as like a masterclass. We want to uncover the underlying creative engine of one of music's most prolific reinventors.
Because that engine is fascinating.
Yeah.
We're looking at how he actively used isolation, how he intentionally engineered friction in his life, and his profound sense of transience to basically fuel his life's work.
Yeah, because his entire career was built on a foundation of paradoxes. I mean, the fear of flying is really just the entry point here.
It is. We are looking at a deeply private person who somehow became one of those visible faces on the entire planet. An artist who shaped rock and roll, but ultimately found its vocabulary completely limiting.
And a visionary who embraced the chaos of the digital age way before most tech executives even understood what it was.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we have to start with the surface level, right? The famous personas.
Right. The characters everyone knows.
Yeah, Ziggy Stardust, the thin white duke, that icy, detached, aristocratic figure, the alien visitor. For decades, I think, the public assumed these characters were just incredible acts of ego, or maybe a desperate need for attention.
Sure, that was the narrative.
But looking at the 1979 interview, the real reason he created them is actually a lot more practical and, honestly, incredibly relatable.
It really comes down to a coping mechanism, which sounds crazy for a rock star, but it's true. When he was a teenager, his actual ambition wasn't to be a rock star at all.
Wait, really? What did he want to do?
He sincerely just wanted to write musicals for the West End and Broadway.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He saw himself purely as a writer. Like, he just wanted to sit behind the scenes, in the dark, and watch other people perform his songs.
But nobody was singing them.
Exactly. Nobody was buying his songs to perform. So he realized, well, if his music was going to get out there, he had to front it himself.
But the problem was, he was not a natural performer. I mean, he admitted he never felt at ease on stage.
Right.
So the question becomes, how does a naturally introverted writer survive the blinding spotlight of the 1970s rock scene?
He uses himself as a canvas.
Yeah.
In that 79 interview, he talks about getting really tired of the lie that the rock performer is exactly the same person on stage as they are off stage.
Right, that expectation of authenticity.
Yeah, he hated the expectation of having to be the rock star 24/7. So he just completely separated the personalities. Ziggy Stardust wasn't just a costume for him.
It was a tool.
Exactly, a distinct functional tool that allowed him to separate the creator from the frontman.
It's almost like creating an avatar in a video game, Or adopting a work alter ego to overcome imposter syndrome at a corporate job. Like building a psychological Faraday cage.
Faraday cage, yeah, that's a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
Right, because he could stand in the middle of this blinding cultural lightning storm, and all the voltage, the fame, the intense criticism, the screaming crowds, it all hits Ziggy Stardust. And it leaves the vulnerable writer completely untouched inside.
The persona totally absorbs the shock. And this actually explains his thematic obsession with aliens and isolation, too.
Oh, right, because of the whole 70s UFO craze?
Yeah, in the late 60s and 70s, UFO culture was massive. People were obsessed with literal hardware, flying saucers, government cover-ups, all of that.
But in the 1997 MTV interview, he openly admits he felt like a bit of a traitor to sci-fi fans.
Because he didn't care about actual aliens.
Right, he was completely indifferent to extraterrestrials. He literally said on tape, Is there life on Mars? I could care less.
Which is hilarious coming from him.
Yeah.
But he used the concept of the alien strictly as a metaphor for psychological otherness. He was painting portraits of people on the fringes of society. Well, for instance, he was deeply fascinated by the Turkish and German communities living in Berlin who were separated from their families by the wall.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, to him, the alien was just a way to pinpoint a sense of intense cultural and personal isolation.
But here's the catch with relying on a Faraday cage, right? Eventually you get trapped inside it.
Yes, you do.
By the late 70s, he realized the characters were actually getting in the way of his writing. He felt he was losing his own identity to these creations, so he started just killing them off.
Which leaves him with a massive problem.
Right. If those characters were the engine generating his creative tension, how does he write without them?
Well, he realizes he has to externalize the tension. If he can't rely on internal characters to create friction, he has to find it out in the real world.
And this sparks a completely new phase of his creative evolution.
Exactly. He begins engineering his own geography of friction. He intentionally uproots himself and moves to environments he actively dislikes or fears.
Which is such a wild move. I mean, think about it. Most musicians get famous and immediately move somewhere comfortable to, bask in the industry praise.
Where they buy a mansion and relax.
But he goes to Los Angeles for 2 years, specifically to see what would happen to his writing if he lived among people he didn't like.
And his review of Los Angeles in these sources is just scathing. He called it a blister on the backside of humanity.
Tell us how you really feel.
I know, and he contrasted it sharply with a city like Detroit, which he praised. He said Detroit had real people energetically trying to survive. But Los Angeles, to him, felt like a complete fabrication. It clashed violently with his need for genuine friction.
So, seeking a different kind of friction, he completely pivots and moves to Berlin. And, we have to remember for the listener, this isn't the modern, trendy Berlin with the thriving art scene we know today.
No, this is late 70s Berlin. It was a profoundly claustrophobic environment.
Yeah, he describes the physical sensation of being surrounded by a wall and machine guns.
He said the longer you live there, the more it felt like that wall was constantly closing in right around your apartment. He was living among serious people who felt society might literally collapse at any moment.
That's intense.
Very. And that physical and political pressure cooker forced a completely different kind of writing out of him.
And he didn't stop there. He also sought out Japan.
Right.
He was deeply influenced by the friction between Japan's ancient heritage like kabuki theater, which is this highly stylized, rigid classical drama, and the rapidly encroaching hyper-modern tech world of the late 20th century.
And he admits in the interviews that he was not a good traveler.
Right. He was frightened by places where he couldn't speak the language, yet he forced himself into these cafes and bars just to feel that spark of isolation. I have to push back on this a little bit, though.
Okay, go for it.
Because as I'm hearing this, it borders dangerously close to the whole tortured artist trope. The idea that comfort kills creativity and we all need to engineer misery, or at least massive discomfort, to do good work. Is that really the takeaway here? Do you have to be miserable to be a genius?
What's fascinating here is how his relationship with that very concept evolved over time.
Yeah.
You're right to question it, and the sources show he questioned it himself.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. In his youth, he absolutely bought into that trope. He generated tension by creating massive personal messes. He admitted he had an addictive personality, and if things were going too smoothly, he would subconsciously create internal conflicts just to produce the tension he thought he needed to write.
Which, as we know, led to a severe, almost fatal, drug and alcohol addiction. He famously said, getting on that rocket ship of the rock lifestyle is exciting, but it's very likely to explode under you.
And he barely survived it. But this is where the profound shift happens in his story. By the time we get to the 1999 BBC interview, he's completely sober. He hadn't touched drugs or alcohol in years.
That's a huge shift.
And he realized a critical truth. He didn't need to destroy his own life to create art. Creating his own conflicts was, in his words, a particularly bad idea.
So how did he learn to observe the chaos without actually joining in? If he's sober and stable, where's the friction coming from?
Well, he discovered he could generate that necessary tension purely through observation and geographical displacement. He could remain personally stable, maintaining great relationships, having a clear mind, while drawing creative energy from the chaotic environments he placed himself in.
So he became a conduit for the tension around him, rather than the source of it.
Exactly.
Okay, so he matures out of the self-destruction. But as we move into the late 90s, physical geography, just moving to a new city, isn't providing enough friction anymore. I mean, he's survived LA, Berlin, and Japan. Moving to another city is basically just a vacation at this point.
Right. He needs a new challenge.
Furthermore, society itself is changing. Rock music is losing its edge. So he looks for a new cultural frontier, and he finds it in the early internet.
Which brings us to a truly incredible piece of archival tape. The 1999 BBC Newsnight interview with Jeremy Paxman. It is just a brilliant collision of two completely different eras and mindsets.
It really is. Paxman is incredibly skeptical. He looks at the early internet, which remember at the time was basically slow dial-up and really basic HTML pages, and he just dismisses it entirely.
Yeah, he tells Bowie, it's just a tool, like a telephone.
But Bowie violently pushes back. He leans in and tells Paxman, no, it's an alien life form.
It's a striking choice of words, especially coming from a man who spent his early career playing with the concept of aliens.
Right.
He argued that the internet wasn't just a different delivery system for the same old media. He said it was going to completely crush our ideas of what mediums are all about. And his reasoning was deeply tied to his disappointment with what rock and roll had become.
Yeah, he pointed out that rock music was born as a subversive, rebellious force. He said when he was a kid, listening to Little Richard on AFN Radio, the Armed Forces Network, which broadcast American blues and rock to a really dreary post-war Europe, it felt like a call to arms. It felt dangerous.
But by the late 90s, the vocabulary of rock was just too well known. It had been co-opted by corporations. It was just a conveyor of information, no longer a conveyor of rebellion.
Exactly.
To him, the internet, with its absolute chaos, its fragmentation, and its pluralism, now carried the flag of subversion. He saw society breaking down from a singular, absolute truth into a world where there are 3, 4, or 5 sides to every single question.
And the internet perfectly mirrored and accelerated that total fragmentation of truth. And here's where it gets really interesting. He talked about the 21st century being the gray space in the middle. He referenced early visual artists like Marcel Duchamp, saying that a piece of art isn't actually finished until the audience comes to it and adds their own interpretation.
And he saw the internet as the ultimate manifestation of that idea.
Exactly.
He recognized that the internet would force a massive demystification process. Because, before the web, rock stars were these untouchable gods placed on pedestals by MTV and magazines. There was a strict barrier between the creator and the consumer.
Right. You couldn't just tweet at them.
Exactly. And he wasn't interested in the internet just as a fancy typewriter or a way to eavesdrop on fans. He loved it because it destroyed that barrier.
Yeah.
It facilitated an immediate chaotic feedback loop. The audience was becoming just as important as the creator.
But think about where we are today with the internet, right? Scrolling through algorithms and walled gardens. In that same 1999 interview, he essentially told Paxman to forget about the Microsoft element and the monopolies, arguing they wouldn't be able to control the programs or the content.
Yeah, he waved that off.
So looking back from today, did he underestimate how quickly that alien life form would be monetized and controlled by giant tech monopolies?
It's a great question, and it raises an important point about his foresight. He was incredibly prescient about the cultural impact, right? The fragmentation of truth, the rise of audience participation, the death of the singular narrative.
Spot on with all of that.
But he may have been too optimistic about the internet remaining an untamed democratic utopia. However, his philosophical embrace of that chaos is what really matters here. He didn't fear the breakdown of the old structures. He welcomed it because he thrived in the gray space.
Which begs a massive question. How does a person constantly seek out friction, intentionally embrace cultural chaos, invent and kill off personas, and accurately predict digital revolutions without completely losing their mind?
Well, the answer is found in a spiritual foundation that he quietly built long before the fame, the drugs, or the internet.
Back when he was a teenager.
Yeah, when he was just 18 years old, living in London, he spent a few years studying Tibetan Buddhism.
And the details in the source material about this are intense. He studied under a teacher, Jimmy Young Rinpoche, who had just led his followers out of Tibet into India.
Right.
And just to impartially recount the history from the source here, without taking any political sides, it notes it was a harrowing escape. The teacher described how Chinese helicopters would shoot at the fleeing refugees like they were shooting deer.
Hearing that kind of first-hand survival story left a massive, massive impression on an 18-year-old kid. He was searching for his spiritual bounty, a thread to a universal order in a chaotic world.
But interestingly, his teacher advised him against retreating from the world. He told him not to shave his head and become a monk.
Yeah, he recognized the young man's talents and essentially told him to exert his energy into music instead.
But the core lesson stuck with him for the rest of his life. The one fundamental principle he took away from Buddhism was transience.
The idea of letting go.
Exactly, not holding on to the idea that anything will last through an entire lifetime.
And that concept of transience is really the skeleton key to his entire methodology. If you truly believe nothing lasts, it becomes incredibly easy to let go of physical, material things.
It becomes easy to let go of a musical era when it starts feeling stale.
Exactly. It becomes easy to kill off Ziggy Stardust when the character stops serving your mental health. Transience is what prevented him from getting trapped in the past.
He told a beautiful story in 1997 about having lunch in Kyoto with a 70-year-old Zen master. They were just talking, and out of nowhere, the master told him, "Religion is over, and it lies in the arts."
And the implication there was that the spiritual life of the new century wouldn't be found in archaic, medieval religious structures, but in the vessel of visual and musical art.
Which he completely resonated with.
He deeply agreed with that sentiment. He felt that organized religion was fading for many people, and that society was trying to find the fragments of a new discipline, a new way to understand the universe through popular culture.
He recognized that as an artist, he wasn't providing the answers, he was providing the pieces for people to construct their own spiritual path. So what does this all mean? We see the culmination of all these forces, the transience, the managed friction, the demystification of the rock god, and the final source we analyzed. It's a profile by 60 Minutes Australia from 2002.
Right.
And the guy sitting in that interview chair is not a tortured artist. He is 55 years old, deeply happy, and incredibly grounded.
By 2002, he had been sober for 20 years. And in a very human moment, he actually jokes that quitting coffee and nicotine was harder than kicking the hard drugs.
Which is so relatable.
Yeah. He was married, living in New York, and completely content in his role as a mentor and a father. He was proudly bragging about changing his daughter's nappies.
The ultimate rock chameleon, the alien visitor, happily changing diapers in New York.
Exactly.
And he had completely detached his ego from the establishment's validation. Unlike his peers at the time, Sir Paul McCartney, Sir Elton John, Sir Mick Jagger, he turned down a knighthood from the British monarchy.
He bluntly said, "I'm working for me." And he didn't need anyone to qualify his work.
But he never lost his sense of subversive playfulness. In that same interview, he recounted meeting British Prime Minister Tony Blair.
Oh, this story is fantastic.
The Prime Minister is standing there, representing the ultimate authority of the state, and the artist walked in wearing a sharply tailored black suit.
Paired with a Vickers dog collar and women's high heels.
Yes! And according to him, Blair didn't even bat an eyelid.
It is the perfect visual. He's an elder statesman, completely at peace with himself, but still engineering that visual friction just to see what happens to the room.
He survived the exploding rocket ship of his youth by learning how to pilot it safely from the ground.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the architecture of his life offers an incredible blueprint. He proves that reinvention isn't about being fake or running away from yourself.
Right.
It's about building functional tools to navigate a world that demands too much of your raw self, and crucially, knowing when to let those tools go.
And that is the true takeaway for you listening right now. You don't have to be a multi-platinum rock star to use these concepts. Whether you are changing careers, moving to a new city that terrifies you, or just trying to break a deeply ingrained bad habit, you have permission to let go of the character you used to be.
Absolutely.
You can embrace the friction of a new, uncomfortable environment, not to destroy yourself, but to observe what it pulls out of you. You can recognize that your life, your work, and your identity are a constant, transient collaboration with the chaotic world around you.
It is a profound, incredibly resilient way to navigate the 21st century.
It really is. But I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on today that builds on everything we've uncovered. We talked about that 70-year-old Kyoto Zen master who claimed that traditional religion is over and that our spiritual life now lies in the arts.
Right.
And we talked about the prediction that the internet is the ultimate gray space, the place where the audience ultimately finishes the art and creates the meaning. Well, if both of those things are true, does that make the internet the new cathedral of our era? And if so, as you scroll through that gray space every single day, what kind of worshiper does that make you? Are you building something beautiful in the friction, or are you just staring out the window of the train?